Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to our friends on the West Coast. Welcome to How to Gain an Edge with Predictive People Analytics. Today's presentation will dive into how you can start driving superior decision-making in your organization today. This is part 2 of our 3-part Summer HR Tech Trends series. No need to watch these in order, but you can find part 1 on machine learning in the on-demand section of our webinars page. If you are registered for this webinar, you are already signed up for part 3. Today's presentation is brought to you by Outmatch, Transforming the World of Work. My name is Charles Summers. It is my pleasure to be serving as your moderator during this hour. If you'd like to get in touch with me about future webinar topics, Outmatch-specific information, or if you'd like to speak with an expert, please reach out by email at csummers@outmatch.com or just chat in your comments. So I thought it'd be fun to start off with a quick poll on your favorite movie. You'll notice that all of these deal with business intelligence and predictive analytics. So give me one moment here as I launch that poll. All right, I'll give you about 30 seconds here to get your answers in. Okay, great. We've got about 78% voted. Okay, we're at 80%, now 90%. Okay, cool. I'm going to close this poll and I will share the results. Okay, so you should see the poll results on your screen. It actually looks like A Beautiful Mind and Moneyball came in as our top 2. Which are, both great movies, both deal with predictive analytics. So I thought that would be kind of a cool little stat here to throw it out at the beginning here in this webinar. So we'll go ahead and move on. And I just want to say start off by saying, it's a very especially exciting topic for us here at Outmatch, being a people analytics company. Outmatch uses people analytics across all of our solutions. We provide predictive assessments, culture analytics, and leadership and development through the #1 talent analytics platform on the market. We have a lot of new exciting solutions and technologies becoming available every day. Recently, we released the Leadership and Culture Institute to help you identify your high potentials and prepare for the future through simulations, assessments, workshops, daily development tasks. Also, I'd like to announce the industry's first candidate-friendly and predictive image-based assessment. In today's tight labor market, this solution is a real game changer. So as Outmatch's capabilities continue to grow, we'd like you to grow with us. So when you have a chance, head to the website and check out all the new resources, sign up for a future webinar, and get the full scoop on the Outmatch platform by scheduling a tour at outmatch.com/schedule a demo, or you can shoot me an email again at csummers@outmatch.com, and I'll put you in touch with one of our experts.
Hey, Charles.
Thank you for joining us.
Charles?
Yeah, go ahead.
You're still sharing the poll results. I'm not sure if you realize that.
Oh, okay. I will go ahead and hide those.
There you go.
Sorry about that, everybody. And so I just want to say, as a thank you today, all attendees will receive a free copy of our most popular ebook, The Essential Guide to Predictive Analytics. With this guide, you'll be ready to follow the lead of highly data-driven organizations like finance, operations, marketing, and healthcare, using the power of predictive analytics to drive superior decision-making in all your talent decisions. I'll go ahead and send out the ebook after the webinar and also include the slide deck from today's webinar. So if you'd like a recording from today's presentation, go to outmatch.com/webinars. Or you can find all of the Outmatch webinars and videos on our YouTube channel. So it'll be posted within 48 hours. During the webcast, you can interact with us using the questions queue in your GoToWebinar status window. Please feel free to ask questions, make comments, or share feedback here. You can also find us on social media by searching at Outmatch HCM on Facebook or LinkedIn. The feature presentation will take approximately 45 minutes, and following that, we'll have some time set aside for a Q&A with our presenter, Greg. So I want to quick run through the agenda for today. Because you're attending this webinar, you know that predictive analytics is quickly gaining momentum in the business world. It's definitely a topic that's trending right now, not just in HR, but we know that HR leaders are paying close attention and striving to stay on the cutting edge of big data and analytics, especially as we look forward to 2019. So what makes predictive analytics so significant right now in today's business landscape, and why is now the prime time to bulk up your analytics capabilities? That's what we'll cover in today's webinar. We'll answer the big three questions, including what is predictive analytics, why now, and how can HR successfully adopt predictive analytics. We'll also talk about how predictive analytics is different from the data analysis that you already do, and how to find practical applications of predictive analytics in your business today. So without further ado, I just want to introduce today's presenter, Greg Moran. He is the founder of several successful HR tech companies, and he is currently the president and CEO of Outmatch, and is the co-author of the ebook that you'll be getting after the presentation today on the essential guide to predictive analytics. So again, you'll get that email after the webinar today, along with the webinar slides. So at this time, I'll go ahead and hand it off to Greg. So Greg, take it away.
Thanks, Charles, and really appreciate everybody joining us today. It's always amazing when we do these webinars. We do them about once a month. I don't do them once a month, but as a company, we do them once a month. And it really tells you something about when we just look at the amount of registrations today. We've got hundreds of people on from all over the world on this webinar, and and the reason for that is, well, we certainly love to think of ourselves as great marketers, right? The topic is so carries so much weight today, right? And it's so important because fundamentally, predictive analytics is really changing the way that businesses operate. We see it all around us today. We see it, in all different departments of our companies. We see it in other companies. And the impact that it really has on the way that we can think about our business is really profound, right? I mean, Charles put up there 5 movies that are basically on this topic, right? And these are mainstream movies. I mean, everybody knows Moneyball and certainly Beautiful Mind. However, I do have to admit, Charles, I've never heard of Imitation Game or 21. So I'm not. I was actually relieved when I saw the results and thinking I was missing something, but those were the low scores. So, but at any rate, it is a huge topic. Organizations of all kinds are really finding new and innovative ways to use predictive analytics, and it really sharpens decision making like we haven't seen, to really give them a stronger competitive edge than we've ever seen before. So before we go on to look at some of those impressive ways that businesses are using predictive analytics, I want to take a minute and define what analytics is, right? Predictive analytics is, it's a word that we hear all the time, especially the word analytics. We have to get better at analytics. We have to use more analytics. Like, these are conversations we even have inside of our own company. We're in this business. I'm sure you've heard this a million times. But to say we need to get better analytics is like saying we need to get better technology, right? It's kind of like a catch-all term, but predictive analytics is something fundamentally different, and that's really what we want to talk about. So the broad definition of it is predictive analytics is really the practice of analyzing current and historical data to make predictions about future events. It's hard to get a more boring definition for a really exciting topic, right? On the surface, it doesn't sound cutting edge when you define it like that, but it's predicting trends and future events that has always been the holy grail of any business. And it not only is business, but it's politics and it's healthcare. Really how we look at the future is really what we're talking about. And predicting that future, if you can predict it, what products are going to be in the highest demand, what solutions will be the most successful, what kind of talent you should be recruiting for. You'll know when you're going to experience shortages maybe of inventory or surpluses of inventory if you're in retail or something like that, or manufacturing. And you'll know really which opportunities to pursue and risks to avoid within your org. So traditionally, businesses really have looked at data and outcomes from previous years, right? We all do this. And then they use their judgment to make assumptions about what we think is going to happen in the future. What's going to stay the same, what goes up and down, and so on, right? We look at data like this. I'm sure everybody on this phone call is looking at data like this on a daily basis. But we want to take that a step further. And we want to then start to be able to apply statistical methods, right? So we want to add precision to this analysis as opposed to, simply what we think is going to happen in the future. We want to actually add some statistical methods to really help us with that analysis. So it's not just what we think, but maybe using some mathematical models to give us a greater accuracy in predicting what will happen, right? And we want to base that on relevant patterns, proven theories, things like that. But what makes predictive analytics different and far more powerful than other types of data analysis is that it really is about identifying complex patterns across big data sets, and then using that to uncover trends that we're not able to pick up when we're just looking at this data with, our eyes, right? Or running a simple graph in PowerPoint or something like that. In other words, it's by making use of technology that we no longer have to wait for a person or a team to identify a pattern or work out some theory that, we don't really know. It's more of a guess, right? So it's using technology to make those better predictions about what we're talking about in the future, right? This is why we said it's kind of the holy grail of business. If we can do this effectively, if we can use the data that we have in our organization effectively and make meaning of that data easier, we can truly predict the future of our businesses. And that's what predictive analytics is really all about. So when we look at analytics, right, here's another way of looking at it. On the left side of this graph, you'll see the most common type of analytics, what we call descriptive analytics, right? This type of analytics, you could also just call this reporting, right? It's your standard kind of reporting. It's telling you what's going well or what's going wrong in the organization. We hear this all the time, right? So a good example of this is our turnover's high. Okay, great, our turnover's high, right? But almost every organization I talk with will tell me that their turnover is high, but compared to what? Compared to last year's turnover? Compared to in some kind of industry average, compared to some other metric? The other problem is that knowing your turnover rate in this case really can't tell you how to improve it or where to intervene or what in your organization might be driving that turnover, right? It's simply telling us what it is. But you have to get beyond that. You've got to slice and dice to really get more sophisticated in your analysis to understand the story behind the numbers, because that's where all the insight is, right? So moving into that middle column, you'll see kind of the second category here of analytics, what we call diagnostic analytics. And these really start to tell the story by identifying meaningful relationships within those patterns in the data, right? So this is a deeper dive that might tell you that turnover is highest among, say, salespeople who don't meet their quota. Well, that's probably in and of itself not a mind-blowing conclusion, right? I'm sure all of you have on this call today, you've seen this play out, know from experience that, say, failing to meet a quota over an extended period or poor performance in general, these things lead to turnover, right? Whether it's voluntary or involuntary. You don't really need analytics to tell you that. We've seen that from experience over and over. But look at how we can apply that insight when we move into predictive analytics. Again, the idea is to predict ahead of time. In this case, let's say, which candidates will struggle to meet quota, which we know is going to put them at a higher risk of turning over, right? So if we can avoid making those hires, let's say in this scenario, in the first place, that are going to fail to meet quota, you're not only going to impact the performance of your organization, you're also going to impact the turnover of your organization. You'll be able to predict the degree to which improvements start to occur in these areas, right? That's what predictive analytics is all about. That's why we say it really is about predicting the future. And it's really about shifting your strategy from a reactive to a proactive strategy, right? That's why this has become really the gold standard in business intelligence. But here's the challenge. Businesses around the world are still working to really adopt this highly sophisticated kind of future-oriented approach. Bersin by Deloitte, who's a large analyst organization within Deloitte, I'm sure everybody's familiar with, that covers the HR space, has said that less than 10% of organizations use predictive modeling in their business and workforce planning. 10%. Now, I'm really curious to see if, I'm not going to ask you to vote, but my guess is that probably holds up between the, few hundred of us that are on this call today. I've never once talked to a company that said, hey, I don't have data. What we hear all the time are companies that saying, I don't know what to do. I've got data everywhere. I just don't know how to make meaning of it, right? That's the key in moving into, really moving into this model of predictive analytics. It's making meaning of that data that we have within our organizations. So one of the things that makes analytics so powerful is that its applications are really limitless, right? We've seen some pretty remarkable things from companies that are really on the cutting edge of predictive analytics. And these aren't even examples necessarily from an HR standpoint, but just to kind of think about to start to approach how to think about predictive analytics. So everybody knows Walmart, right? They're a great example of the use of predictive analytics. They have a state-of-the-art analytics hub that's called Data Cafe. It houses over 40 petabytes of transactional data. Now, here is what you can use. What day is today? Today's Wednesday. You got a couple more days to the weekend. If you're out this weekend with friends, here's a great piece here's a great quiz to give somebody who knows what a petabyte of data is. So it turns out it takes, to give you a sense, it takes 745 million floppy disks. Hopefully there's more than me on this call who remember floppy disks to store a petabyte of data. Or another way to think about it is if you started recording today on your iPhone, a video recording in HD quality, and you let it run for the next 3.5 years, that would be 1 petabyte of data. It is a lot of data, right? And it's insanely powerful. So Walmart processes 2.5 petabytes of data every hour, right? It's insanely powerful. And it's the world's largest private cloud with over 200 streams of data coming in. It's just things like meteorological data, economic data, Nielsen data, social media, a lot more. Have you ever walked into a Walmart when there is, say, a storm coming up? I live in Colorado, up in the mountains of Colorado, and it's always amazed me, right? You go to Walmart, and the day before the storm, there's just shovels everywhere, and the day after the storm, they're gone. How does that happen, right? And that's a really simple use of weather data when you're talking about it. So Walmart uses Data Cafe to identify and solve complex business problems, like why has there been a sudden decline in sales, for instance? Maybe just one thing, right? Within minutes, they're able to identify the causes, where before these problems may have taken weeks or even months to try to solve. But because they have that complexity, because they have those streams of data and they're able to make meaning of that data in real time, they're able to make those decisions and then adopt their business practice accordingly. Get more of the inventory that they need in, get more of the inventory that they need out. Again, looking at those complex problems a very different way, but do it in real time. Another great example of this is Kroger. Everybody probably knows Kroger on this call as well. And Kroger actually bought a analytics. It brought it completely in-house when it acquired an analytics firm back in 2015. So this is a grocery store chain buying an analytics firm. And the analytics arm of that business applies predictive modeling to segment shoppers and then create individualized experiences for those shoppers. So think about things like personalized promotion, tailored pricing, right? Which have become the hallmark of Kroger's best-in-class loyalty program. So when you, having seen their success in same-store sales growth and then in seeing those market share gains, as well as really rapid growth in the digital space, you see rivals like Whole Foods, now part of Amazon, are really following suit and then partnering with analytics providers. And this is one of the big things behind Walmart's, Whole Foods acquisition by Amazon, to really use analytics to then stay competitive at a whole different level, right? So Kroger proved its tech savvy capabilities by looking at tackling the biggest complaint of customers in a retail environment, the checkout line, right? We all hate it. So what they use is actually predictive analytics combined with their in-store technology and then real-time data feeds to ensure that customers never have more than one person ahead of them at the checkout. So this has actually cut the average checkout time in a Kroger store from 4 minutes to less than 30 seconds, right? So this is just really real world studies of how this has happened within businesses today. Marketers have also embraced predictive analytics in a way that enables them to reach the right prospect exactly at the right moment. So Forbes Media, everybody knows Forbes, I'm sure on this call. Forbes Media, for example, uses a predictive intelligence platform to help identify prospects within their advertisers' markets. And then they deliver that media directly to those prospects that are perfectly aligned with a specific buying stage and product interest. Now think about that versus the traditional form of, say, magazine advertising or something, where we run an ad, we blast it out to 1 million subscribers, and we really hope that 0.25% are maybe interested. Fundamentally different. This predictive intelligence platform powers a really super targeted dynamic media programs that can unlock a whole level of ad optimization for Forbes customers, companies like large companies that are advertising in their magazines every day, like Dell, right? So Forbes Chief Revenue Officer, Mark Howard, says that this layer of predictive analytics provides a level of visibility into a target audience that they've never seen before, and it's never been accessible before, right? So as you can see, predictive analytics is really revolutionizing these industries and so many others. And I'm sure if I asked you to give me examples within your organization, you could probably give me examples there too. And it's empowered really early adopters to operate much faster, much smarter, and really stay ahead of the competition. Predictive analytics is more accessible and it's more widely used today, really thanks to advances in technology and enormous amounts of data at our fingertips. Again, this is what I mentioned before. I've never once talked to a company that says, I don't have enough data, but we hear from companies all the time saying, I don't know how to make meaning of this data. I don't know where the insights are because it's all over the place. What it's also done, what big data has done for HR, which, as we all know, it's a traditionally soft skills industry, is to really enter an era of using predictive analytics and really start to, as HR professionals, really start to flex our analytical muscles, just like we've seen with our peers in finance and operations and marketing and throughout the organization. So to see how we've evolved into this data-rich space within our companies, let's just look back for a quick second here at the evolution of HR tech over the last 30 years, because it's been a wild one, right? If you've been in the HR space for a while, you've seen firsthand an explosion of HR tech since really the 90s. And then this has been followed by waves of really rapid innovation and consolidation that haven't slowed down, right? It's still happening today. The evolution of HR tech mirrors actually in just about every way the evolution of HR itself, and it reflects a major shift in our space into a more strategy-based position from more of a process-based. We're really focusing on more of a people-based, right? And long past are the days where HR is really about the administrative operation of the organization. So the first big wave of talent management technology came in the 90s. HR tech up to this point, again, mainly focused on record keeping, payroll processing, things like that, core HR type tools. But tech in the 90s really kind of kickstarted a big movement toward automation. We began to actually free an HR organization from a lot of those administrative and resource heavy tasks that have been around for a long time, right? What automation really enabled were huge gains in efficiency. But companies quickly grew tired of managing products from 7 or 8 different vendors. A lot of us today are in the same exact spot, right? And that's when integrations of systems became really essential. Today, automation and integration are a given in HR technology, right? It doesn't always work exactly the way we want to, and it's not always easy getting there, and it breaks a lot. But the fact that we need to be thinking about integration and automation are the table stakes today. Companies are much more concerned with employee engagement and teamwork and innovation and collaboration, and they want HR technology solutions that are not only engaging, but productivity oriented, right? Integrated talent management is still really important, but the focus is on reinventing the way that people work. With team-based hubs for collaborating and coaching, always on pulse surveys and feedback systems, tools to really empower individual learning and career growth. This is where we are today, right? And we see this evolution all around us. And I'm sure just about everybody on this call has some sort of technologies that are running through their head today saying, yeah, this is where we are. But it continues to evolve, and it continues to evolve at a rapid pace. So all of this is to say there's no lack of demand for systems and tools in the HR space, which means our access to data is going to continue to get more and more and more. That scenario where I said nobody tells us they don't have enough data, well, you're going to get more and more data. That's not going to pull back, especially when you consider really the recent and really dramatic shift in the way the companies look at, say, performance management. And moving from periodic check-ins to now what we have today in many organizations, which are nearly continuous streams of pulse and engagement data, right? It's not enough to know annually how somebody's thinking, and it's not enough to know quarterly, but we want to know on a near real-time basis, how are our employees thinking about our organization? How is that affecting their engagement? And ultimately, how is that affecting their performance? So the HR tech market is expected to grow about 10% annually, continuing through 2020. I'm sure it'll probably continue well beyond that, and this is according to Gartner. This is going to produce ever increasing amounts of data, right? We're all going to live with that fact. But consolidating that data and then leveraging it to forecast the future. Remember, we said predictive analytics is about predicting the future rather than just reflecting on the past. That's the crucial next step here. That's where predictive analytics really comes into play. So this represents a huge untapped opportunity for HR, right? Everybody on this call today, if you're in HR, your job has changed fundamentally over the past 5 years, and probably ways that in the previous 20, it hadn't. I think your job is probably going to change in ways that we can't even imagine today in the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, right? It's a massive untapped opportunity for us as HR professionals. By embracing predictive analytics, we'll start to be able to uncover patterns and relationships across your workforce that have never been clear before. They're gut feelings that we had that we can now really start to quantify and really start to see in real time to make change. You'll be able to quantify your impact on business performance and the bottom line, right? And that's ultimately where we need to get as HR professionals. But before we can really embrace predictive analytics, especially within HR, there's 2 big barriers that we need to overcome. two really big things that continue to block the way in many organizations today to different degrees, right? So first, unlike our friends in finance and operations or marketing, we typically, if you've been in the HR space for a while, we typically didn't come into this trained as HR analysts, right? We came into this because we love the people side of business. And to fill this skills gap, at least until we really bulk up that analytical expertise that maybe new hires coming into the field may possess today, HR organizations are going to have to hire teams that now help them understand, apply, and then use predictive analytics efficiently, so that we're not in that situation of like begging IT for this data, begging another department for that data, but we're able to consume that data within our organizations, apply it, and then make meaning of that data using predictive analytics. The other big barrier that we see in organizations today is that HR is often, unfortunately, disconnected from other key parts of the business, right? And oftentimes this means finance and sales. So in some organizations, talent acquisition is actually completely disconnected from talent management. What this means is that pre-hire data, things like candidate job fit scores or interview, scoring or something like that, isn't actually connected at all to post-hire outcomes, things like engagement and performance, right? The data exists, but it exists in different places within our organization, which means we can't get it together and actually make meaning. So first, you've got to break down the silos within HR. Then we really need to partner more closely with other business units to capture, but most importantly, consolidate that data to get to those truly predictive results that we're talking about. It is amazing to me. I've been in the space for probably about 15 years. It is amazing to me how often, even today, this scenario exists, where you talk to organizations and they have truly remarkable talent and process within, say, talent acquisition. But when you ask for performance data, it's unavailable to them, right? Or vice versa. We've got to break that. And that's probably the biggest barrier that we see in really seeing HR start to embrace predictive analytics in fundamentally new and different ways. Because overcoming these barriers is 100% worth the effort, right? And it's not a little effort, but it's 100% worth the effort. And that's because predictive analytics is going to drive superior decision-making, right? It's going to support the type of strategic visioning and the problem solving that our C-suite leaders are really demanding and expecting from HR. So here are the few of the questions you'll be able to answer and then take action on really using predictive analytics, right? To look at reporting versus analytics. So we talked about this before, but now to kind of drill down on it a little bit, right? We can start to take a look at, say turnover. It's probably something that I'm sure it's something that every one of us are measuring today already. But with basic reporting, you'll be able to see and track your current turnover rate, right? We do that today. But by using predictive analytics, you're going to know what your turnover rate, say, next year. Maybe based on market trends, based on employee engagement scores, based on labor statistics, right? We're able to combine this data to form a view of what our turnover will be next year, the year after, so that we can start to plan our workforce around that. And then with that kind of knowledge, you'll be able to develop, say, a retention risk index, for example, and then implement preventative solutions, right? And that's like, we want to get ahead of this problem, to be able to implement preventative solutions to then retain your top performers or avoid hiring new employees who are going to be at risk of turning over, right? These are the things we want to be able to understand, but it's only until we stop taking simply a reporting view and start taking a more predictive view of the future that we can start to intervene in ways that really drive a different level of value to the organization. Another, I think, great example of this is something that we hear all the time, is cost per hire, right? This is a metric that's been around forever within talent acquisition organizations. So what basic reporting can really tell us is, what's our cost per hire, right? And after hiring for a given amount of time, we can then use predictive analytics to start to tell really what the cost per hire will be when you start to weigh in factors like low unemployment rates, things like that, right? Maybe Glassdoor ratings, right? Or things like that provide a tailwind or a headwind for us. You can also then break this metric down further to find out what's the expected daily cost to the business to source and fill jobs, right? Again, this really starts to go into how do we do our jobs. It's not only about automation, but at this point, it's really about adding value to the organization so we can plan the future. So knowing that will not only provide you with, say, a time to fill estimate for future vacancies, right? We do that all the time, but it's also going to help you build your business case for investments in products or technology that really improve hiring efficiency as well as employee retention, right? How do we intervene to affect the future? That's really what this is fundamentally all about. Another great example, again, we see this all the time, is around employee performance. Performance ratings, other metrics like that, depending on the quality of those metrics, what it can do is tell you who your top performers are. Well, that's great information. And again, none of this is to demean the value of time to hire, the value of cost per hire, the value of understanding who your top performers are. But it's about going a step beyond. What predictive analytics will help you do is then maximize the performance among those employees and fill more roles in your organization with more top performers, right? Because that's how we impact the future. Knowing what drives your top performers to succeed is going to give you an edge in the way that you think about and the way that you go about future selection and future development. And these analytics can be leveraged today via predictive assessments to really help identify candidates who will perform best on the job, and then identify opportunities for improvement that will most impact their performance within your organization. Everything that we're talking about today is possible. It exists, right? But it's really about taking a broader view into what is possible and then taking steps into that future. So just a quick case study that we've seen over and over again. So we talked about those are the questions that you'll be able to answer. Those are the type of questions using predictive analytics, right? But let's look at actually how this might play out in your organization. So first, how do you implement predictive analytics into your talent strategy, right? Sounds really complicated, sounds really hard, probably sounds really expensive, but then how do we quantify the hard dollar impact of the gains that you really would want to expect to achieve, right? So let's look at a predictive selection process, right? So this is a use case that we see every day, right? It's applying predictive analytics to selection. Many of our clients use predictive analytics in this way, right? They're using our technology to do this. So we have a lot of experience in this, and we see significant improvements in employee performance metrics and company performance in general. So in the talent acquisition world, every hiring decision has value, right? We know that. Good hires are the ones who go on to become top performers, while bad hires don't fit, they term early, they never reach their full productivity. Good hires are good and bad hires are bad, right? We know this. But how good and how bad? How much are those hiring decisions really contributing to or costing your company? That's the real question we want to answer. So we know, based on research that we've conducted on thousands of job candidates today across our platform, we're running almost 20 million candidates a year through our technology. So based on that research, we know that certain behavioral traits lead to success in certain jobs, and they can be strong predictors of job performance. So by looking at these behavior traits across your incumbent population, you can begin to see what set your top performers apart. So in this example, top performers that are the blue dots here are poor performers. I'm sorry, let me go back. I'm explaining this graph wrong. So top performers are in blue, poor performers are in gray. And they score in the same range on, say, cautious thinking, right? So what does that say about cautious thinking? It says that it doesn't really differentiate performance at all, at least not for this role. And again, we're talking about a specific role here, right? And this will be different in different roles. So in this example, we see our top performers and our poor performers are all clustered together on cautious thinking, right? doesn't delineate performance. On the sociability scale, however, we see a really clear spread here. We see our top performers tend to score much higher on sociability in this example, and our poor performers tend to score a lot lower. What does that mean? That means that sociability in this role is a predictor of future success, right? That is where our top performers are clustering, and it's differentiated from our poor performers. If we had seen, like in the cautious thinking, if we had just looked at top performers, we'd say, well, they tend to be more careful. Yes, that's true. However, so are our bottom performers, right? So it's the differences that we're really looking for. So keep in mind, again, these are just two traits. It's just a really easy example here, but these are just two traits you might look at in any predictive algorithm that's used for selection. Ideally, you'd have a much larger scope of traits and behaviors, as well as a good sample size to take a look at this kind of data to really be able to reliably predict job performance over time, right? But this is a good example of how this works. So once you know what leads to success, like in that example, again, just using that one trait of sociability, once you know what leads to success in a particular role, you can then focus your hiring efforts on people that you know are most likely to be top performers. Again, we're just using one category here as an example, but you know then how to target, right? You look at that across a few competencies, you have a really good map, behavioral map of who's going to succeed in your organization. So for a good example of this is one of our insurance clients. It's a well-known insurance agency. We found that strong sales reps for that insurance agency or reps who scored well on a predictive assessment, sold $84,000 more in their first year than prior sales reps. Well, you start to go over hundreds or thousands of sales reps, which in this example would be the case. You're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars to bottom line and top line performance with that organization. See, it's not only about predicting turnover, it's about predicting future performance, right? Because that's how we're driving the top line and that's how we're impacting the bottom line of our organizations. So by understanding, in this case, what that predictive model looks like for hiring for, say, insurance reps, we're able to then more effectively screen in those candidates who fit, more effectively screen out those candidates who don't fit, and see this kind of impact within the organization. One of our retail clients is a really well-known convenience store chain. Again, probably many of you visited there this morning to grab a cup of coffee. This organization saw similar results. Across their franchise owner population, which is what we work for, and they've got thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of franchisees, we found that strong franchise owners, or those who scored well on the predictive assessment, drove $6,000 more in sales each month compared to poor franchise owners, right? So again, millions and millions and millions of dollars of impact within the organization. I want to go back because I just completely missed a slide here. I want to go back for a second to that insurance example and kind of show you what this breaks down to, right? So that insurance example, we said $84,000. There's about the difference that was the difference between the sales of top performers and bottom performers, about 200 hires projected for next year within a certain region, $16 million bottom line impact. That convenience store client, $72,000 in annual sales, right? We said $6,000 a month, $72,000 in annual sales between top performing franchisees and poor performing franchisees. About 325 franchises projected to open within the next year, $23 million bottom line impact. You're talking real money, right? In any size organization here. That's the key. That's really what predictive analytics can do. And again, this was done using a behavioral model that is really designed to understand what are the differences between top performers and bottom performers, right? And then be able to use that to predict their performance moving forward. So if predictive analytics was once beyond the scope of HR, that's not the case anymore. An analytical mindset is absolutely critical in HR today. just as it is in finance and operations and marketing and countless other industries, right? There are countless other departments within our organization. We would never accept a lack of analytics in, say, finance. We would never accept it in, say, marketing. We can't accept it in HR either, right? It's about, predictive analytics is really, it represents the cutting edge of data analysis and business intelligence. Again, according to Bersin by Deloitte, now is the time to really get serious and double down on those investments, right? Companies that don't are going to be disrupted by companies that do. It's as simple as that. Because those companies that are better able to recruit their competitors' people and really supercharge their sales force or supercharge their marketing or product development or whatever those critical areas within your organization are, they drive bottom line results like never before. That's really what this does. And look at the way that it's evolved within organizations up to today. So I hope that this has given you kind of some things to think about and some good examples of how predictive analytics can be used within an organization. Happy to open it up to questions and thoughts around this. We'll get to, I think we've got about 10 minutes. We'll get to as many of those questions as we can. Whatever we can't get to, we're happy to follow up with you too. So just fire away at those questions and don't worry about the time frame. And if we run out of time, we'll answer them for you and get them out to you. Afterwards. So Charles.
Thanks, Greg. So I do have a handful of questions already. Like Greg said, keep on enter your questions in now if you have any. And we'll try to get to them here. I do have a handful. The first one is around your comments earlier on connecting pre-hire teams with talent management teams. And the question is just how can you connect those teams together? Like, where do you start?
Yeah, good question. I think first of all, in some ways, it's about connecting the data first, right? We see this in a lot of organizations. This is a really common area where you see silos start to form within HR. We see talent acquisition really disconnected from talent management. And I think that sometimes really where it has to start is on just the sharing of data, right? That if we can, and there has to be a business case. There has to be a reason for this, right? So if we can go up to, say, the C level and really start to make that case of these are the kind of questions that we want to answer, right? We don't want to just understand, as a talent acquisition organization, we don't just want to understand what is our cost per hire, what is our time per hire, but we as a talent acquisition organization want to understand how are we driving quality of hire, how are we driving the performance of the organization. The only way that we can understand that is to get access to that data, right? But it's making a clear business case, I think, is where you start. And one of the things that we see organizations struggle with a lot is being able to really articulate what is the bottom line result we're going for. Well, if we believe that by connecting, say, performance information to pre-hire, if we can reduce turnover, or let's talk about performance for a second, like in the case of that insurance company, if we believe that we can then increase the performance of, say, our sales reps, again, we'll just use this because it's an easily quantifiable position, by 10%, whatever that equates to for your organization, that starts to have hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars of impact within the company. And it has to start with building that business case, right? It has to start with that business case to then share the data. I think that's where we start. And I wish I had a more complex answer, but it's really trying to understand what results are we aiming for? What do we believe that with the use of this data, by combining this data, we'll be able to impact? If we make a strong business case, we're going to get access. If we don't make a strong business case and it's more about, I'm curious, it's kind of just a broader thing, it may be more of a challenge. So build that business case based on tangible results. What do you think you can increase performance? How do you think you can view turnover reductions, and how does that quantify? Being able to put it in real dollar terms will make a huge difference there.
Thanks, Greg. So I have another question here that is pretty similar from Tanya here. And her question is, and you mentioned how to get started kind of by building a case, but she asked, how do you get started? Do you recommend any classes? I live in the Denver area and want to start this process for my HR division. So maybe comments on some different technologies and things like that they can get involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I love the fact that you live in Denver. So do I. There are an abundance of classes around data analytics, right? And how to think about that. And if that is something that you're interested in learning more about, I would take an online class. I mean, you don't have to go get a master's degree or a doctoral degree in this stuff, but to have a basic level of understanding, look at your local community colleges, right? They all have data analytics programs today. I know, actually, really just kind of, this won't relate to anybody else on this call, but Tanya, who lives in Denver, because I live in Denver, I know that Red Rocks Community College actually has some great classes around this. I know that because my daughter is in high school in the area and takes some classes there. Look at your local community college. Look at online colleges. It's not so much, or online classes, I mean, it's not so much about trying to gain a mastery of how to do it, right? We can hire data scientists, we can hire data analytics professionals within our organization. It really is about how do we start to think in these terms? How do we build business cases? And I think that kind of intro level to data analytics would be helpful for probably every single person on this call, including myself. It's it's a topic that we all should be able to speak in an educated way within our organization. So, but that's a great question. Like so many questions, the answer is find whatever you can online and start. Is the easiest way to do this, just to familiarize yourself with the thinking around this area.
And then, Greg, one more follow-up question to this is, what IT product do you recommend to work with HR analytics? And that comes from Eduardo.
Yeah, so it depends is the answer, right? It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So there are numerous ways. So let me take a quick step back and just caution everybody on the call. There are two ways. One of the things we really try to influence clients away from is focusing on the technology first, right? First, understand the business questions you're trying to answer for your organization. Understand those things, and then let the technology kind of sit below that. But it's not, we want to make that decision first. What is it that we're trying to solve for? Are we trying to solve for turnover? Are we trying to solve for performance? Are we trying to solve for some other factors, diversity, or other factors that we might be looking at within our organizations? That's where it starts. When you go down to the technology layer, there are great dashboarding tools that are out there today that can roll up different technologies, right? That you can kind of easily plug in to, basically business intelligence software that's out there today. I mean, products like Tableau, I think, are a good example of that really will help you visualize visualize data in different ways and help you make meanings of it. There are more sophisticated business intelligence products that may be out there as well. But first, you want to start with what problem am I trying to solve for? Then when you go below that, let's say then if you are, and this is a totally self-serving answer, of course, but let's say that you want to go down and the problem you're trying to solve for is around turnover and performance, then I would really recommend you look at something that is more of a predictive analytics tool around selection. Things like, I'll be an example. There are other companies out there that take a kind of subtly different approaches, but will kind of get you to the same place. So it's really looking at what problem are we trying to solve for, and then trying to identify the right technology. So if we're trying to solve for ongoing performance, I would start to look at assessment on the front end and maybe engagement on the back end, and then looking at the correlations between those data. Depending on the size of your organization, you may be able to do this on a spreadsheet, to start to match that data. if you're a larger organization, I would take a look at, business intelligence tools. I would first take a look at like Tableau or other products like that would help you start to visualize data, right? Which is kind of a good start with a lot of this.
Okay, so I'm going to continue, and I'm just going to go right down the line here. There are quite a few more questions. So I don't know if we're going to have time for everybody's question, but we will make sure to follow up, after the call if we don't get to your question. So Greg, to what extent do you feel that data privacy laws are an obstacle to companies progressing in this space?
GDPR was a big deal, right? It continues to be a big deal, probably something that impacted all of our businesses. I know it impacted ours, but it should not be a hindrance, right? When you look at data privacy, well, first of all, I would say it depends on the type of data that you're pulling in. So if you're absorbing things like social media data, things like that, you may, you really want to watch kind of what you're pulling in. You want to understand what data you can be absorbing. I don't mean necessarily from even a legal standpoint. I mean, what do you want to know, right? And there are certain things we don't want to know. We don't want to absorb that data. So I think when you start to bump into bringing in social media data into kind of complex algorithms, I would say that's where you start to, you do run into some questionable areas potentially. It's got to be job relevant, right? The standards of this stuff haven't changed. So if you're pulling in information that is not job relevant, you're going to potentially get in trouble. Now, the type of data that we're talking about, say, behavioral data on the screening side, maybe you're combining that with post-hire performance data, and you're looking at engagement data and combining those things. This is all data with, where you're not going to be dealing with privacy issues. But as it pertains to selection, which is often where you're going to see issues around privacy, you still got to start by asking yourself the same fundamental question. Is it job relevant? Just because the data exists somewhere doesn't mean we want to pull it in, right? Because even in kind of black box models, right, when you're talking about like, machine learning and we start to pull in data that, we take kind of a more is better approach, right? We're starting to pull in data from all over the place. There may be things that we're absorbing that we don't want to find out. So look at those data sources. If you're pulling in external data, look at those data sources that still rely on that same fundamental question. Is it job relevant? If you believe it is, then use it. The other benefit, again, I'm just going to do a 5-second commercial here. The other benefit of doing, if you're taking if you're looking at this for selection, the other benefit of using like a behavioral assessment to use as the underlying model for predictive analytics in hiring is that it can be proven job relevant, right? So we're always looking at validation and reliability and kind of the underlying criteria to make sure that the assessment is legally compliant. So, but when you're pulling in outside data, you do want to adhere to that same standard.
Great. So we might get kicked off here because it is 2 o'clock or approaching 2 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. And we have a handful more questions that we'll make sure to answer via email or we'll reach out to you in a one-off basis. But I just wanted to let me change the slide here. I wanted to thank you all for attending today's presentation on predictive talent analytics. I really hope to see everybody next month for part 3 in our HR Tech Trends series. It's on how to manage your high growth culture. That we're actually presenting with our partners at iCIMS. So for more information, please email me at csummers@outmatch.com or go to outmatch.com/webinars. That's where you can find all of our upcoming and on-demand webinars. So I hope to see you next month. Thanks.